besides that, let's talk about former Sooner offensive lineman Sherrone Moore is now the head coach of the University of Michigan. First off, I want to give an exciting shout out to not only Sherrone Moore, but even Jim Harbaugh, who's headed to the NFL once again. Some people were thinking, oh, he wasn't going to, stick around. He won a championship, so that was the reason why he was getting out of there. He don't like the rules, blah, blah, blah. And I think that's preposterous. I think that if you've been paying attention to Jim Harbaugh, he's been trying to get back to the NFL for like the last 5 years. It's just the job that he has wanted. Not only has it lined up to what he wants, but the teams that he's willing to interview with, they haven't picked him, which is fascinating in itself. But LA Chargers, oh my God, it's a perfect job for him. And so I want to shout out Sherrone Moore. PG, when you saw that they went ahead and elevated him from OC, even though we all know that he could do the job because he was the coach in like 5 games when Harbaugh was suspended, or 4 games while Harbaugh was suspended. What do you think about Moore getting that job?
I thought it was the right hire because Moore is likely going to keep the core of that staff together outside of the guys that are going to leave, and he's going to keep a lot of those players there. So you might see 1 or 2 guys hit the portal from Michigan here in the spring. I don't really feel like you're going to see it here in the next 30 days. I feel like it's going to be more so in the spring, but Moore is a guy that he's from Derby, Kansas, so he's rooted in this area of the country that is really just putting out a lot of talent. For instance, Derby, Kansas is putting out Deshaun Brain this year, who's currently crystal balled to end up at Oregon, but I would imagine that Sherrone Moore is going to try to utilize his roots a little bit more on the recruiting trail, and I think you're going to see Michigan end up in the Texas and the Kansas and Oklahoma's backyard. So I thought this was a really good hire. Not to mention, Sherrone Moore has put out, 2 Joe Morrow Award offensive lines?
Last year was Washington. This past season was Washington, but the 2 years before was Michigan's.
Yeah, so when you look at, what this is, like, they're retaining one of the best offensive line coaches in the country. So I think this is a really good hire for Michigan. I don't think you're going to see Michigan have too much of a drop-off. In fact, I would guarantee you're probably going to see better quarterback play out of Michigan.
I can see that. And I think that you'll see a difference in the way they play. Now, the only question I have is going to be who is Moore going to bring in as his offensive coordinator. And then at that point, like you mentioned about quarterback play, I can totally see where you're going with that. The question I ask is will they really even change their formula? Because to be honest, that punch him in the mouth, grind, run the ball down your throat, and only throw when you really need to, it works in the Big Ten.
Well, and it works across the country.
Yeah.
The game had shifted from the way Alabama played, which is how Michigan plays now, back in the 2010s. And then it shifted to a little bit of that air raid offense when Lincoln Riley came in. But then I think people found it's really hard to play with a super high tempo offense. And regardless of how good your defense is, they're going to be out there way too much.
Yeah.
They're going to play way too many snaps. So I think people saw that and said, well, let's dial back that high tempo offense to still run a high tempo, but make it more of a bully ball. And when you need to, you can create an explosive play. But you're going to try to pound the line of scrimmage, and you're going to play both sides in the trenches really well, and that's what's going to win you the national championship. So I think we're starting to see another change in college football to go back to that style a little bit, but not to a complete reverse, kind of like where Alabama was winning 3 straight national championships. I think they won 3 straight at that time.
No, nobody's won 3 yet.
But they went to 3, right? They went to 3
I think
straight?
they went to. Yeah, I think they did go to 3 in a row. Yeah,
it was back then, back in that days when they had awful quarterback play, but their defenses were absolutely incredible. Think back to that. What was it? 15-9. Alabama LSU championship.
No, yeah, that was that game was.
We're not going to go back that far, but I think we're going to meet somewhere probably in the middle, and I think that's where college football is probably going to thrive. And I think Sherrone Moore is probably going to help kind of lead that way a little bit.
Yeah, I can see that. And that game itself, as you mentioned, God, that was an awful game. It was It was. I get the defensive battle, and it got a lot of people excited. I had zero interest in the excitement of that game being as slow as it was. It was really, really such a slow, um, methodical game. It just was not entertaining to watch them just beat up on each other, and no one can move the ball offensively. And everybody was just bad offensively. But yeah, I could totally see that going into those old school bully ball, and that seems to work. Like it works, especially in the playoffs. It's just my dudes versus your dudes. Who's got the best dudes? Joe's versus pros type deal. And Michigan just went out there and just was the most physical team. And I think Moore will keep that going. I think that that's the mindset that he's going to keep implanted in them. I think Michigan keep it going. Now, granted, the biggest thing is they're losing. They're going to lose a nice chunk of players, but I don't think it really makes that much of a I don't think it's going to be that much of a drop off as people expect, especially as you mentioned. He's going to retain a lot more of the players because he is staying, and the portal's going to open. You'll see a few players here and there decided, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and go somewhere else. But I think you hit the nail on the head. I think majority of those players are going to leave probably in the spring window whenever it happens, because school's already started. Most of them are just going to go ahead and get their training in, and then once the spring window hits, you'll probably start seeing some shifting, because at that point class is hitting. That's kind of one of the big problems of the transfer portal, on top of just college football in general, is that everything is in the window of classes, and you never have enough weeks to be able to get the portal open and let people move around and still be able to hit classes on time, but all because the timing is always bad. But anyway,
Well, and I'll say this, I don't think we're going to see as big of a drop off with Michigan as people think. I don't think people really have paid attention a whole lot to their class, which, yeah, I get it. It was the number 19th overall class, but it's a very good class. They got one of the top offensive tackles in the recruiting class, and Andrew Sprague. This was a guy Oklahoma actually pursued pretty hard early on. Then they got Jaden Davis. Jaden Davis was a 5-star quarterback at one point until he pretty much just stopped going to camps, right? And, when you stop going to camps, they start paying less attention to you. You fall in the rankings. They loaded up on the offensive line. They got some decent tight ends. Listen, I think Michigan reloaded. I think they're going to have to go in the portal and probably address a couple needs, but I think they're going to figure out what those needs are in the spring. And then I don't think we're done seeing Alabama, Arizona, and Washington portal additions. I think those are probably going to happen in the spring when they figure out where these new coaches are going to have them on the depth chart. So I think Michigan will probably go and take a couple of those. I don't think Michigan loses a whole lot of people, though.
No, I agree with you there. That's a